Wonderful. So we'll go ahead and dive right into it. Maybe you can share a bit more in terms of how does demand generation really work in the telecom industry?
Okay, well, it's a good question, and you made me think, to challenge myself this morning on how to answer that in the right way. So, the thing that I think about for demand generation is that post GDPR, the world kind of changed. So we're already living a year of post GDPR, and I listen to lots of people talk about it, and they say it's made marketing a better discipline, and I really agree with that. But I don't think budgets necessarily shift to support the new way we need to work, right, is one thing. So we're asked to market in a more inbound kind of way, if you like, but we don't always necessarily have the clout to do it. So then I was thinking about the sort of things that work really well for Arkadin, okay, and there's a real mixture of things for demand generation. So I was just going to give you a couple of examples as a flavour.
Sure.
So what's not gone away, and it's never going to go away, is this kind of face-to-face trade show event kind of approach, which kind of time in and time out is a real cornerstone of your marketing activity. And I guess we all know that, right? But one thing I think about events is, and certainly that we do at Arkadin, is we do them with a lot of love. So if we go to a trade show, that the trade show world hasn't necessarily innovated a lot in the last, I don't know, over 10 years. So we try and do cool and innovative things around trade shows, and we try and put fun into our presence. And it's just things like the brilliant content that we try and do, the giveaways that we do, how we try and get people to the stand, how we engage with them, the team that we bring and bring our A game and stuff like that, right? We put a lot into that. And then there's the kind of client stuff. So hospitality, fun, sport related, those kind of things just aren't going away, and they continue to be brilliant. And then, back to the digital side, at Arkadin, we're really lucky because we have a webinar business in-house. So we sell webinars to clients, right? So we also use a lot of webinars in our sort of demand generation strategy, if you like. I think the world of webinars, it's back to the same thing. How do you make them innovative and fun and engaging? How do you poll people? How do you hold yourself to account for great content? How do you use channels like social, right? Back to our point here. How do you use social media to sort of promote in new ways your webinars? And we're quite good at Arkadin at doing little videos, or we have done in the past, of the presenters trailing their webinar, speaking, pushing it out, doing extra ways, if you like, to try and bring people in. And then the other thing is what's new that's going on, and you do this day in, day out, Joe, but things like this, the podcast world, agile content, getting people blogging and thought leadership out there, are we really holding ourselves account to doing that in the best way that we can? Not always, but that's an aspiration. And then just to finish off, right, the world's changing, account-based marketing, one-to-one selling, that whole thing is well and truly here now. So every organization that I would know of is having some dabble into things like account-based marketing to some maturity or other. Really long answer to the question.
No, I mean, thank you for that. It sounds like you guys are doing quite a lot. And it's interesting because you mentioned offline or kind of traditional marketing. So you talked about trade shows, talked about kind of meetings with clients. I think a lot of the times we get so caught up with kind of the new shiny bell when it comes to digital marketing, we forget about that kind of the old ways actually are quite effective.
They are, and they just have their place in the mix, and I do feel like there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen around those things. But what's a really cool thing about things like trade shows as well is it brings the internal team together, right, in a way that the digital world can't always do. So you get like this whole experience of going to a trade show if you do it with love, as we say, which is something I think that it's kind of critical to your sales and marketing effort as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole purpose behind kind of digital marketing and social selling is to get that face-to-face meeting with the salesperson and the prospect. So I think by, having those traditional routes like events and trade shows is you still get to have that face-to-face time. So you kind of are able to bypass that and go straight to the relationship building face-to-face.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, to your point, like I said, it is difficult because when you're doing trade shows, you're kind of in a sea of other kind of companies.
Yeah.
A lot of the times companies, they use kind of similar tactics. They have like a banner, they might have like a short video playing, but it's really challenging to stand out in a crowd, especially in a lot of the larger conferences. Would you say so?
I think that's absolutely true. And I come back to that point again about just how I always like to think of a trade show as like how you experience it as a client or as a person coming in, you know. So when you walk into this sea of like me too vendors potentially from the eyes of a client, like what is it that draws you to an Arkadin or an NTT or someone else? And we're just trying to think about all the time around, you know, people want to eat and drink, they want to come to see you and they want to enjoy food and drink. They might want to charge their phone. Can we help them do stuff like that? You know, what just like the little bugbears at trade shows where you can just bring people onto your stand. And I'll tell you one thing we did this year, which is really cool, and it happens a lot, I know, at trade shows, but we're kind of laughingly calling it the silent disco. So basically, we had a little area of the stand, and you could have like 20 people sitting down and headsets on like this, just listening to one of our brilliant professional services ladies talk about how she helps clients adopt Microsoft Teams. And it just, people were just sat there and they were captive, and they stayed with us for quite a long time, and they felt like they couldn't move probably after they'd sat down, and then they felt obligated to talk to us, and it just worked brilliantly. So, you know, it's just like trying to constantly think about little things that you can do to draw people into you.
Yeah, no, I think the silent discos is something definitely very interesting, something I haven't seen or heard of before. So I think it's definitely something very unique, but I think it fits with your kind of business model as well, and kind of
Yeah,
offerings that you guys have.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. So short presentations, right? How can you draw people in? Not for an hour, not for 30 minutes, but just 5 or 10 minutes, and give them the sort of, you know, the taster session.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing advice. Now, you talked about a lot of different things you're doing, from online to offline to social to webinars. Which of these kind of channels or formats do you think has been most effective for you guys when it comes to building your lead generation?
I think, you know, the ones that we've talked about have been really effective. And I think things like, you know, things like webinars are still really effective. But I think the challenge is sometimes capturing the tangible and intangible results, right? So, for example, if we run a webinar, a bunch of people show up, we can measure that, we can monitor that, we can pass leads to sales. But then you hear anecdotal things afterwards, like someone will say, you know what, my client watched that webinar on demand and we've now got this meeting and this is happening. And you can't always capture that on your CRM, or you can't always capture it as part of your ROI. So you really have to be, another thing I always think for marketers is you've got to be super curious to the point of almost annoying with your colleagues, just to say, you know, like, did it work? What happened? What was the feedback? And that's how you capture some of that ROI that we so desperately need, that's not always in the system. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's in it. Trade shows, we can, you've just got to be quick and you've got to follow up and you've got to do it. But, you know, just keep hassling your sales and other colleagues just to find out what's working. And then, you know, things like, I think it's, you know, coming onto social selling, it's such a big area. And I went to an event yesterday and everyone was talking about social selling. There was a lady up on stage, one of the big software companies, talking about social selling. And I just think everyone's super curious, and people are at such different stages. And I think Arkadin, we're doing some great stuff with social selling, but I look at some of these companies and I think we're still on our journey about how much further we could go, and understanding, to this lady's point, actually, it's not about selling, but just on social in the same way, you know, like aggressive prospecting. It's something different. So how do we sort of move ourselves into those kind of areas, not just a license, but an approach that really helps us differentiate ourselves.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And even my approach to social selling is putting the social back in selling. So it's all about building relationships,
Yeah.
providing valuable content, insights before you even meet that prospect. Because by doing so, you're already by default building your trust and credibility. So by the time a salesperson just walks into the room, they already know kind of your expertise, they know kind of your familiarity, and it's much easier to have that conversation. It's much more natural versus someone who you've never met before,
Yep.
and just kind of bring you out of the blue and say, hey, we'd like to come by and do a trial with you guys. It would something be interested in. So a lot of the times it's about kind of building that trust and credibility up front.
Yep.
That facilitates a sell later on.
I think you're absolutely right, you know, and I feel like, you know, so we've worked together a little bit, Joe, and after we did that last fantastic session with you, one of the pieces of really interesting commentary I got back was, some people just embrace that social selling story and they go off and they do it. but not everyone does, and that's kind of fine. But it's almost seeing yourself as your own business, right? So in the world of entrepreneurs, social selling is probably just a must do, because you're just trying to get out there and make connections, and you are your brand. But when
Mm,
you get into the corporate world, people don't always see that it's almost the same thing. When they can build this brand, they're part of a company, but it's their personal brand, and it's going to help them sell and make connections and improve their chance of getting face-to-face meetings and all those kind of things. But maybe they just have to make more of a connection between, that personal brand, helping them do that, as it would if they were an entrepreneur, right? And kind of living and breathing and dying by that kind of thing. And I thought that was a really interesting commentary. And if we can get that out to sellers, about the power of it, maybe that will help us, convince all those people in our organization who have the potential to do that.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's an excellent point. And even for me, I try to emphasize the point that at the end of the day, people are buying from other people. Yes, they may be buying from Arkadin, but at the end of the day, they're buying from Helen, or they're buying from Fred, or they're buying from someone else in the team in which they trust to deliver on whatever was promised in that sales meeting. So this is why it's, at least in my experience, it's crucial for everyone in sales and marketing to some extent to really have that presence. Going back to what I was saying, building that trust, building that credibility. So, and I've seen it across different organizations, because I've trained, tech, finance. So I've seen what works, what doesn't work. I've seen, cold emailing versus, the
Right.
new approach. And I've run experiments, and obviously the results are dramatically better when you take the time to first understand your audience, provide insights that are valuable to them. And then at that point, you're not really making a sales pitch. It's a conversation of, how can I help? Which makes it so much easier.
I think you're spot on. And one valuable thing amongst many, I guess, that I took from the last training that you ran for us was just around that, exactly what you said, which was answering client questions. So if we think there's like, I don't know, 5 key questions that we would constantly or consistently get asked from clients, how do we make that part of our social profile on LinkedIn? And secondly, what's really important, I would say, from a marketing point of view, is not to just train our salespeople and expect them to be social sellers. Well, we kind of say we trained you, but to
Mm.
be leading from the front, to say we are also the front-facing, client-facing part of this business. Our LinkedIn profile should be just as good, if not better, as our sales colleagues, as we kind of push them to do the same. And that's something that I think we could do better in marketing, is just leading from the front.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think marketing definitely plays a role in kickstarting social selling a lot of the times, even though the title has selling in it. A lot of the time,
Right.
the marketing team is the one that kickstarts the initiative, gets the salespeople involved. So yes, you're absolutely right, because at the end of the day, salespeople are going to ask, okay, you want us to do it, but what have you done, essentially?
Right.
So if you can
Right.
showcase, internally things that have worked for you, and use those as kind of mini case studies to say, hey, look, guys, this is what we've been experimenting with on a corporate level. If you were to apply these at a personal kind of sales level, you'd have, perhaps better results than we're having, because it's a peer-to-peer kind of relationship you're building.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's the point, right? In the end, you kind of it's a funny one, because account-based marketing is kind of about sales, and social selling. So you get these programs that they're just such a blend of sales and marketing. I think that's great. And I think that's one of the reasons we love it. But in the end, I guess that the relationship is being driven from the sales side. So, we need to walk the walk and talk the talk, and kind of approach these things together. And it's interesting about the ownership thing as well, because I was listening to a couple of quite advanced social sellers talking about this yesterday, about where should ownership sit. You get into all these discussions in an organization, and the kind of feedback was, it doesn't really matter where it sits, but it does need top-down buy-in. So just a top tip from a lady I heard yesterday, actually, and we haven't implemented this here at Arkadin, but just something hot off the press, if you like, from yesterday, was they don't train a sales team unless the manager is already trained and active and part of social selling. So in other words, it's so important for our sales colleagues to be led from the top. So if
Mm.
we don't have top-down buy-in, they don't do it. So again, we don't implement that here at Arkadin, but I just thought it's another really nice way of looking at or reiterating the importance of salespeople quite often do what the manager tells them to do, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we kind of obligate that top-down buy-in from a management point of view?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's been the case with a lot of my clients. And a lot of the times they'll start even higher. So I have trained CEOs, CMOs of companies on kind of just the fundamentals of what is social selling, how can it help your organization, just so they can get an idea of saying, okay, maybe I've heard of that. I'm not really sure how it works out, but now I have a better idea. And as a result, they get excited. When they get excited, then obviously their team has to get excited because they report to them. So yeah, it's a trickle down effect. When you have kind of excitement and buy-in from the top, then usually it trickles down, and someone, say in a junior sales role, will essentially have to do it.
Yep.
But it's the enthusiasm is contagious at that point. They're kind of they're following their orders, but they're also kind of excited by the opportunities.
Yeah, that's right. And I was thinking about it and thinking, I think, in marketing, maybe our role in social selling is just to continue, as well as to help that top-down buy-in, kind of continue the excitement and the innovation around social selling as well. And, you asked me at the beginning, Joe, around working with you as an example. I think that's the sort of thing in marketing where we really bring value, or, I hope that would really bring value to our sales colleagues, bringing in people from the LinkedIn entrepreneurial world who work day in, day out with many companies, right? And just showing them cool stuff, practical tips, quick wins, easy ways, or tried and tested ways of engaging with clients, right, from your experience. And I think if we can bring that value to our sales colleagues, that to me is a big part of our role. Keep the excitement going, show them what's out there, and to continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the education piece is huge, because any salesperson, they're usually very much bogged down in, replying to, prospects, the follow-ups. There's a lot on their plate. So I think that, yes, marketing can definitely play a big role in terms of educating them on what's possible, and also exciting them. And I think it goes back to playing up to the different strengths. So traditionally, marketing has been very good at developing content. It's kind of one of the key functions of any marketing or communications department. And I would say that that is kind of an advantage that marketing has over sales, because sales is very good at taking that content and adapting it to the person they're meeting with at that time. Well, they may struggle with creating the content. So I think it's about going back to what you're saying, ROI and tracking. It's a process. So a lot of the times when I'm doing this strategy with clients, we'll get together the marketing and sales team to first identify the strategy. So what kind of markets do we want to go after? What kind of audiences do we want to target? What's some of the feedback we're getting from our current clients or prospects? And then that helps form the strategy. And then from there, we'll say, okay, now that we know the strategy, what are the pieces that we need to put in place? Who needs to do what? And a lot of the times marketing will say, okay, we'll start the content creation portion. We will share it with you. We'll obviously work with you guys to make sure it's applicable for your upcoming meetings. And then further down, once the sales teams implement it, then they can go back and say, I love that you guys have that feedback loop and saying, okay, salespeople, what was the feedback you've gotten? Has anyone reached out to you from, say, a webinar or a post you did or a video you did? Anything like that is obviously helpful to the marketing team, but it also helps optimize the process. Because at the end of the day, you're working together. You want to make sure what works and what doesn't work. And if you have enough people saying, look, that webinar was really good, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you guys, then obviously it's a big win for, I think, both parties.
That's right, and just to kind of come full circle on it, something like social selling, and what you're describing, it's just a kind of online evolution of how you want to work as a marketing and sales organization, right? So how you approach your clients, what your strategy is, what your message is, what your feedback loop is, how you go to market together, all the things which we would want to be doing as part of our sales and marketing approach. It's just doing that online. It's all those same things, isn't it? So, none of these things exist in isolation. And you're right, that we just need to take those approaches and kind of bring them to the digital world. So sales and marketing best practice, where we would like to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, it is a journey. Like I said, there's no one who's kind of full circle. Everyone's kind of learning. Doesn't matter whether you started, 10 years ago or you started now. It's one of those things that, especially in digital, it's changing so rapidly that if you ever think that you're ahead of the game, you're probably not. So it's
Yeah, you're so right. Here's another phrase I heard yesterday, which I just thought was an awesome phrase as well. And it was from a guy speaking from a company called Rico, and he said, "Live life in beta." I said, "That's just great, right? We should be constantly, whether it's digital, well, it's obviously best in digital, I guess, but continuously looking at what's working, what's not working, try it, change it, test it, and off we go again. Like the days of the sort of 1 year marketing plan, kind of gone, and we should be living in a continuous 90-day cycle of test and go, test and go, test and go. And I found that quite an inspirational thought, actually, and to bring back into our organization to just say, are we agile in our approach, and are we living in a beta world, and are we trying and learning and trying and testing and going again? Because that's where we'll sort of deliver true excellence. I hope at Arkadin, our social selling journey, I hope we continue to become best in class, and that next year when I go to events like this, we can be on stage talking about, through working with people like Joe and LinkedIn and other organizations, we've taken our sales organization to be, a real social selling at the core, best in class team, because I think that would just be fantastic.
Yeah, that would make me so happy. I would absolutely love to see you on a big stage talking about successes you've had in social selling.
Let's make it happen, Joe. Let's make it
do
happen.
it. We're going to do it next year. We're going to have you on a big stage next year talking about your case studies and wins. Awesome.
Great. There we go.
Wonderful. So you talked a bit about kind of, our collaborations thus far, but it's kind of good to get your feedback on kind of how you see the collaboration thus far.
So, I think I've alluded to it, and we've got sessions coming up as well. So we're kind of halfway through our journey. But what I really like about working with you, Joe, and the work we've done so far is the real practical and easy to digest format about giving advice to sales colleagues. So, if we pick 3 or 4 areas, as we have done, which is around what sounds quite basic, like making sure your profile is awesome, right? And people might think that they already have an awesome profile, but from our training session, I took away as well, 2 or 3 tips about how to make my profile great, which I hadn't done. And then moving on to, answering the right questions, the content we share, practical tips, examples, people that do it well, people that might not do it well, just reminding people, and then little snippets and videos and how-tos to help them do it. So that to me is how social selling training should be: kind of practical examples, useful, inspirational, because we're giving them also insights from your work with organizations and that you do in social selling in general. I find that to be the best kind of social selling training.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. Like I said, I think the team has been very responsive, and yeah, I'm overwhelmed by the positive feedback. So thank you for making that happen, first off.
No problem, Joe. Thanks to you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Helen. There's a lot of really good insights that you've shared today. Is there anything else you want to share with any organizations that are just starting their social selling journey?
Yeah, I think social selling is just give it a go. Back to our point, give it a go. Give licenses with training, help people, give them advice, lead by example, and give it a go in your organization. If you're not doing it, I think it will transform the way you can go to market, and you can differentiate yourself in a post GDPR world, right? That's what we're all trying to do. So if you're not doing it, get on board.
Wonderful. Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Helen. I really, really appreciate you sharing your insights. Very, very valuable.
Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Well, if you're watching this and you enjoyed Helen's interview, please feel free to share it with your colleagues or anyone else that might benefit it. Feel free to subscribe or comment any other challenges you're having when it comes to social selling. And we shall see you next time. Thanks again.
Thanks.